In the next chapters, we have 3 pictures of the Adam's family. We have Cain and Abel, Noah and the flood, and then we have the Tower of Babel. These are the first children of Adam and Eve, and they both bring sacrifices to God. And Cain is a farmer, and he brings the fruit of his labors. Abel's a shepherd, he brings a lamb. And Scripture says that God had regard for Abel and his offering, but he didn't for Cain. And I used to feel very sorry for Cain. I mean, he's a farmer, what would he bring? Does that not make sense, to bring what's good for him? So why does God reject it? We aren't told why God is rejecting it, but we are told at this moment, does Cain know which is the acceptable sacrifice? God comes to Cain and says, Cain, if you do what's right, I'll accept it. And this is where we see Cain's heart come out. See that self-righteous? He doesn't want to be corrected. He wants God to accept what he's brought on his terms. Who's the authority here? Cain is being his own authority. I can worship however I want, and God should accept it. That's a self-righteous attitude. You can tell self-righteousness because a self-righteous attitude does not want correction and will resist when correction is given. God corrects Cain. Cain, bring the right sacrifice. I'll accept it. And Cain doesn't want it. In the next events that happen, we see in Genesis 6, God says, the intentions and the thoughts of the heart were only evil all the time. People that he had created were only evil all the time. I call that self-indulgent. I can do whatever I want, and nothing bad's going to happen to me. And then the third one, with the Tower of Babel. After the flood, Noah's family began to spread out just a little bit, and God had said, fill the earth. And the people that had settled in one area said, let's not spread out. Let's all come together and build a tower that will make a great name for us, for ourselves. I call that self-exalting. I will be as great as I want, and nothing bad will happen to me. We have 3 individual pictures, but do you see what they all have in common? None of them are saying, yes, God, all I have is yours. All of it is saying, no, it's for me, it's mine. So where did that come from? Well, how many apples do I have inside this apple? How many apples are inside of here? Any guesses? Okay, well, you know that there's seeds in here, so you probably guessed 5 seeds. Here's some right there. Imagine that we take the seeds out and we plant all 5 and we get 100% yield. Okay, 5 trees. And then we take all of those apples every season that come off of those trees and we plant those seeds in the ground and they grow. And we take all those seeds out of all those apples and we plant those and they grow. And we take all those seeds. How many apples are in this one apple? Okay, it just keeps going. If I change the seed, if this is the only apple in the world, there's no other apples in the world, and I change the seed in this apple, have I just changed all the apples that will ever be in the world? Genetically, if I've changed this. Yeah, right? This is Adam's apple. Okay, what am I saying is that there's only one Adam and Eve, so when sin and death come into Adam and Eve, guess what they're going to pass on to the seed? Sin and death. Now, if you've ever worked with a 2-year-old, you know that no, with the little stomp, and the mine, some of you have young children, I see you smiling already. No, mine. That does not have to be taught. Honey, let me tell you how to say no with an emphatic, you're not going to do what Mommy asked you to do. Where does that come from? We're born with that. That's our natural default. That's the sin, and the death comes out of that. We got that from Adam and Eve. So, question. Every apple that comes out, every person that comes out of Adam and Eve is going to have sin and death. True? Yeah? Okay. I get you to agree with me now because then at the end, I'm going to get you on that. So I just want you to know that was a trick question. If we look at this point in history, we've double-clicked Adam's family, then we look down through everyone. Who does God have that is saying, yes, I'm yours? Well, here we have Abel. Second picture, we have Noah. Third picture, we have, there's nobody. When God confuses the languages so that they will spread out like he told them to, out of that Tower of Babel, all the nations now spread out from each other by language group, by tribes, by geography. They begin to spread out and fill the earth up, like he said. But the nations are not set on exalting God's name. What are the nations set on? Exalting who? Themselves. Our nation, we will be great, and we will make a great name for ourselves. So in Genesis chapter 12, there's a huge double click. And if you have your Bibles and you want to just come along with where we are tracing, the Lord said to Abraham, leave your country. I'm in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. So if you want to divide the Bible, know how the Bible is divided. Genesis 1 through 11 is the first big section, and Genesis 12 through the end is another big section. Because what God does now, watch, he takes this man, Abraham, and his wife, Sarah, and he says, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, go to the land I will show you, and I will make you into a great nation. So in the previous chapter, we have people trying to make themselves. We will make ourselves great. In Genesis 12, what is God saying to Abraham? I will make you great. Do you see where it starts? It's not what Abraham is going to do for God that is going to make him great. It's what God is going to do for Abraham that's going to be great. And he gives him promises. I will bless you. I will make your name great. You will be a blessing to all. I will bless those who bless you. Whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So we're going to go away from the nations now in this story. They're still there. The nations of Genesis 11 are going to come in and out of the story, but we've double-clicked away from the nations, and we see them again in the book of Acts. They come back into play. But what has God said to Abraham? I will make your name great. I will give you the land, this land that I'm showing you, and I will make you a blessing. I call these promise cards. What does Abraham have to do to get the promise cards? What did God tell him he had to do? You just have to leave everything else. Abraham lived in Ur of the Chaldees, and this was an advanced society during the time of Abraham, about 2000 BC. And they had 2-story buildings, homes. There was actual running water in the city. It was an advanced society. And the people of this city of Ur looked down, the educated people looked down on one particular group of people, nomadic people, people who lived in tents. And so when God tells Abraham to leave his family and to go to the land where he was going to be shown, do you know what that looks like to Abraham's family? Do you know how that's going to appear to the people in Ur? How is he going to look? Yeah, he's going to look like he's a simpleton. It's going to be unknown, unpredictable. And what kind of retirement plan is Abraham going to be on? And when I say unexplainable, I mean when the relatives ask, what in the world are you doing? It doesn't make a lot of sense, except that who said? And God said, and it was so. God gives these promises. Abraham goes with his wife Sarah, and God takes them to the land where they're going to be. And in Genesis chapter 15, God is going to make an agreement with Abraham about these promise cards. Official agreements at this time, the way that you would make a covenant agreement would be to get an animal, and you would cut the animal in half so that the 2 sides of the animals would lay on either side. Both parties then, for a contractual agreement, would walk through the pieces of that cut open animal, and what they were saying was, may God do so to me and more. May I be like this animal if I don't keep this agreement. That's what you were saying. When the agreement that God was making to Abraham, Abraham, these promises that I've said to you, I am now making a contractual agreement with you to keep them. Abraham falls into a deep sleep, and only God passes through the pieces. Who is God making the agreement with? He's making the agreement with himself. So how does that sound? May I do so to me and more if I don't keep... Do you understand that there's no one greater to swear by than God himself? So God agrees. How sure is this? This will happen because who said so? God has said so. Now, a covenant agreement, like a marriage covenant, how long is it good for? Until death do us part. So an agreement is good as long as the two parties making it are alive, right? So if Abraham had gone through the pieces, the covenant would have been good for as long as Abraham was alive. And what God is going to do is going to take so much longer than Abraham's lifetime that the agreement is going to be good as long as God himself is alive. See how this is the surety of these promise cards. And this is Genesis chapter 15. All of this is taking place. And God says to Abraham as the sun is setting in verse 12, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick, dreadful darkness came over him. And then the Lord said to him, know for certain that your descendants... Now, Abraham has no children when God is saying this to him. And Sarah, his wife, can't have children. So they are older. Abraham's about 85 at this point in his life, and Sarah's 75 years old. So you understand that when God is talking about descendants, this doesn't make sense to him. And he says, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own. They will be enslaved and mistreated 400 years, but I will punish the nation they serve as slaves. Afterwards, they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here because the sin of the Amorite has not yet reached its full measure. That promise card about the land, he said, Abraham, your nation that I'm going to make out of you and your family is going to be taken away from this land that I've promised you. 4 generations later, they're going to get enslaved, and I'm going to bring them back. Now, that little verse right there, that unfolds what happens in the rest of the book of Genesis. That's the summary statement for the whole rest of the book. What we find in the story is, sure enough, Abraham and Sarah do have a son. Sarah has her handmaiden there. She says, listen, it's impossible for me to have children. God's promised you descendants. Go ahead and just have a child by Hagar. It's kind of surrogate mother. The idea was that Sarah would kind of adopt that son. Well, that never worked. When Sarah's 90 and Abraham's 100, they have Isaac. Now that is impossible. Why did God wait so long before he gave them a son, Isaac? Because what was the promise? I will make your name great. God was showing it was only something he could do. It's not something that Abraham and Sarah could do. And then in Genesis chapter 22, God says to Abraham, I want you to offer Isaac up to me. Now that makes no sense at all. Why, God, you've promised me descendants through Isaac. You've promised to make this great nation through Isaac. And now you're asking me to sacrifice him. We find out later that Abraham was expecting that God would just resurrect him right back up if he actually sacrificed him, because what did Abraham have to go on? That God had said, I will give you descendants through Isaac. Where do they go? In Genesis chapter 22, God says, Abraham, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of, this is important. If you star things or write things down, circle that, Moriah. Go to the region of Moriah, and there sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. So Abraham goes, and of course Isaac, his father, as they're going up the mountain, I see the wood and the fire to get it going. Where's the sacrifice? And Abraham says, God will provide for himself a sacrifice. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. Where is this? Mount Moriah. They get there, and sure enough, Abraham has the knife raised, and God says, Abraham, stop. Now I know that you have not withheld anything from me. And Abraham looks, and there's a ram caught in the thicket right there. God had provided the ram. Why? So that Isaac, the son, could be spared from death. Now, do you see it up there on the pictures? Do you see it together? What is God looking for in the response of people? That I will believe what you say and I will do it. Yes, and yours. There's nothing I have that you cannot say, I want that, and I will hold back from you, God. When God says, Abraham, leave, what does Abraham say to get the promise cards? Yes, I will believe that you will do these promises. And when God says, I want the thing most precious to you. I don't want you to love that more than me. What was Abraham's response? He's yours. There is nothing I have that you cannot take that I will love more than you, God. Does God have his response that he wants? That's Abraham.